Have you ever watched someone you love being treated as if they were invisible worse? As if their dignity could be torn away with a single gesture? Imagine walking into a store, expecting nothing more than respect, only to be met with humiliation. An elderly black woman, with years of life and wisdom etched into her face, walked in to buy something simple. Instead of kindness, the store manager raised a hand and slapped her. 2 minutes later, the very people who thought they held power were forced to face the storm they had created. What would you do if that were your mother, your grandmother, or even yourself? Would you stay silent, or would you stand? This story is not just about one woman's pain. It is about a choice every one of us may face: to ignore injustice, or to fight for dignity no matter the cost. Stay with me, because this story will shake you, inspire you, and remind you of the power that rises when truth refuses to bow. If this message touches your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Let's step together into this story. The rain hadn't stopped all afternoon. Sheets of water pounded against the tall glass windows of JFK Airport, each drop smearing the outside world into silver streaks. Inside the first-class lounge, the lighting was warm, soft, a sharp contrast to the storm pressing against the building. Travelers with leather briefcases and designer coats moved casually through the entrance. The hum of rolling suitcases and muted conversations floated through the air. Ethan Cole, 46 years old, stood near the counter with his boarding pass in hand. He was calm, almost understated in his tailored navy suit. But his presence carried a weight, a quiet authority that came not from volume, but from conviction. He had flown through this airport more times than he could count. Yet something in the air felt different today. "Sir," a sharp voice cut through the soft ambiance, pulling the attention of those nearby. Richard Hale, the lounge manager, stepped forward with a practiced smile that held no warmth. He scanned Ethan quickly, skin tone first, then attire, then the slight wear of raindrops on his shoulder. His eyes narrowed, and the smile slipped. "Step aside," Richard said firmly, gesturing toward the sliding glass doors. "This area is for our premium guests only." For a moment, the words hung heavy in the air. A businessman with silver hair adjusted his cufflinks and slipped past Richard without being asked for a ticket. A young white couple carrying matching Louis Vuitton bags followed, breezing through the entrance without pause. None of them were stopped. Ethan held up his boarding pass. "I have a first-class ticket. Flight 227, Gate C7. His voice was steady, polite, devoid of hostility. Richard didn't even glance at the pass. Instead, he folded his arms. "First class costs $8,000, sir." "Sir, you sure you're in the right place?" The quiet lounge seemed to hush. A woman near the espresso machine glanced up, eyes flicking between the two men before dropping again. A janitor slowed his sweeping, the broom pausing against the tiled floor. Ethan's jaw tightened. He could feel the sting of old memories rising the corner store clerk who once accused him of stealing candy at 12 years old. The college professor who told him maybe engineering was too ambitious. The endless boardrooms where his authority was questioned until he revealed the title CEO. But today wasn't 12 years old. Today wasn't college. Today wasn't a boardroom where he had to prove himself. Today, he was Ethan Cole, the man who owned more shares of this airline than most of the executives who ran it. Still, he stayed calm. He had learned long ago that anger gave people like Richard exactly what they wanted. "Please," Ethan said softly, extending the boarding pass again. "Check the name. It's valid." Richard waved a dismissive hand. "I don't need to check it. I know who belongs here." His voice rose slightly, making sure others could hear. "And it's not you." The words landed like a slap. A ripple of discomfort spread through the lounge. No one spoke. No one challenged the statement. But eyes darted quickly before retreating again. Melissa Grant, the HR supervisor stationed nearby, shifted uneasily. She adjusted the lanyard around her neck and opened her mouth as if to say something, then closed it. Richard outranked her, and crossing him meant career suicide. From the side, Clara Monroe, the lead flight attendant for the upcoming flight, stepped into view. Her blonde hair was pulled tight into a bun, her uniform crisp. She gave Ethan a long look, one that traveled slowly from his polished shoes to the soaked edge of his suit jacket. "Sir," she said, her tone mocking professionalism, "if you can't respect the rules, we'll have security escort you out." Ethan inhaled deeply, steady and measured. The scent of roasted coffee beans lingered in the air, clashing with the sour taste of humiliation rising in his throat. His grip on the boarding pass remained firm, his knuckles whitening just slightly. Behind him, Maria Lopez, a young lounge attendant barely in her 20s, watched with wide eyes. She wanted to speak, wanted to say that she saw his ticket, that she knew he had every right to be there, but her chest tightened with fear. She needed this job. Rent was due. Her younger brother's tuition depended on her paycheck. So she stayed silent, head bowed, hands trembling as she stacked paper cups at the counter. Robert Miles, a supervisor with 20 years at the airline, shifted uncomfortably. He cleared his throat. "Richard," he muttered, barely audible. "Maybe we should just check his credentials." "Confirm," I said. "Step outside." Richard snapped, cutting him off. His voice was louder now, drawing the attention of every corner of the lounge. "We don't need to waste time. Some people try to sneak their way in here. Not on my watch." Ethan stood still, unflinching. The rain pressed harder against the glass behind him, a storm mirroring the quiet fire building inside. He could lash out. He could demand recognition. He could shout his title, his wealth, his power. But he didn't. Not yet. Instead, he let silence stretch, long enough for Richard to feel comfortable, smug, certain that his authority had been cemented. "Very well," Ethan finally said, his voice calm but carrying weight. "If that's what you've decided." He turned slowly, his polished shoes echoing against the tile as he walked toward the glass doors. Each step was deliberate, a man carrying not defeat, but patience. When the doors slid open, the roar of the storm swallowed him whole. Rain splattered against his suit, plastering fabric to his skin. The chill seeped into his bones, but his posture never faltered. He stood beneath the awning, just outside the lounge, while privileged travelers passed him without a second glance. Lightning flickered across the sky, illuminating his reflection in the glass, a man forced out of a place he rightfully belonged. But in that reflection, Ethan didn't see weakness. He saw clarity. This wasn't the first time the world tried to tell him he didn't belong, and it wouldn't be the last. But this time, the ending would be different. Inside, Richard smirked in victory. Melissa fiddled with her lanyard, eyes lowered. Clara whispered something to a colleague and laughed. Maria turned away, biting her lip to keep tears from spilling. Robert sat frozen, regret gnawing at him. And from the shadows of the corridor, unnoticed, a young baggage handler named Jamal Reed lifted his phone. Quietly, carefully, he pressed record. The storm had only just begun. The rain kept drumming against the glass like a relentless metronome, counting out the seconds of a humiliation that refused to end. From beneath the awning, Ethan watched people glide in and out of the first-class lounge as if some invisible hand had parted the doors for everyone but him. Each time the glass slid open, the warm light spilled onto the wet tile, then retreated, and with it, the soft laughter, the steam of fresh coffee, the peculiar hush of privilege. Inside, Richard Hale straightened his tie, pleased with the shape of his own authority. He leaned toward the counter and snapped his fingers at Melissa Grant. "Run the verification." "Slowly," he added, voice pitched just loud enough for those within earshot. "We do not reward line cutters." Melissa's fingers hovered over the keyboard. The airline's internal system flashed on her screen, patient and blue. She knew Ethan's name would be there. She knew the manifest would confirm first-class priority boarding and executive status. She knew he had every right. Yet she swallowed, felt the dry click in her throat, and typed at half speed. "He is the kind of man who could end my job in a minute," she thought. "But Richard is the kind of man who can end it today." Clara Monroe set down her tablet and walked to the glass doors. Through the reflection, she studied Ethan standing in the rain-streaked light, his posture still, his chin slightly lifted. There was something about that stillness that unsettled her, as if he was watching her with a patience she could not match. She pushed through the doors and stepped under the awning, careful not to let a single drop touch her uniform. "Sir," she said, tightening her voice to that clipped official register, "this is a controlled area. If you remain here, we will have to call security." Ethan turned to her, eyes steady. "You may call whoever you need," he said, quiet but firm. "While you do, check the manifest." He held her gaze, then added, "And your assumptions." A flicker of color rose in Clara's cheeks. She turned on her heel and went back inside. The doors sighed shut behind her. At the espresso station, Maria Lopez stacked porcelain cups with hands that would not stop shaking. She could hear her mother's voice from last winter, in Spanish, praying over the kitchen sink that Maria would keep this job, that the rent would not be late again, that her little brother could finish community college and transfer to a 4-year program next fall. Maria had promised. She had said yes. "I will keep my head down. I will be careful. I will not draw attention." But now the promise felt like a small rope cutting into her palms. She looked up and saw Ethan glance at his watch. He wasn't restless. He wasn't glaring. He wasn't pleading. He was waiting as if time had to answer to him, not the other way around. Robert Miles drifted toward Richard. "Let me at least scan the pass," he murmured, trying to keep the conversation private. "If we're wrong, we're not wrong," Richard said, a smile slicing across his face. "We're cautious." He tapped the counter once with 2 fingers. "The company appreciates caution." Robert's jaw tightened. 2 decades of long nights, weather delays, angry passengers, lost luggage, crisis calls. He had told new hires 100 times that fairness was currency. But he also knew the currency that managers like Richard traded in fear, favor, and the performance of control. He stepped back. He hated himself for stepping back. The glass doors parted again. A pair of business travelers hurried in from the rain, shaking droplets from their trench coats. Richard lifted a hand in easy welcome. "Gentlemen, right this way." He beamed, waves them inside without a glance at their tickets, behind a column, half hidden by a row of potted plants. Jamal Reed steadied his phone. The lens captured the small theater of the privileged, the choreography of nods and glances, The quiet cruelty of a system that operated on whispers rather than rules. The camera also captured Ethan's shoulders, squared and unmoving, the rain tapering and then returning, the city gray and vast beyond the glass. Melissa coughed and pretended to read the screen. She had barely typed anything. She felt the weight of Ethan's presence even from across the room, and it made her skin prickle with shame. Part of her wanted to say his name out loud, to break the spell by speaking the truth. "Mr. Cole, you're cleared. Please, come in." Part of her wanted to keep typing slowly, to satisfy Richard's hunger for the small victory of power. Ethan turned his back to the lounge for a moment and looked out across the wet tarmac. A baggage cart rattled past. A jet taxied into position, its nose cone gleaming like a blade under the floodlights. His reflection in the glass layered itself over the moving aircraft, as if he were painted across the machines he had helped finance, had helped modernize through partnerships and contracts and board votes. He remembered the hardware store on 7 Mile Road, where he was 16 and ready to buy his first set of tools with money from a summer job. He remembered the clerk watching him, the way the clerk followed him down the aisles, with a smile that never reached his eyes. He remembered setting the drill on the counter and the clerk calling the manager to double-check, loud enough that the room heard it like an accusation. Back then, he had lowered his eyes. Back then, he had said nothing. A tap on the glass snapped him back. Clara stood inside, tablet in hand, her expression growing sharper. She mouthed 2 words through the glass, not listed. Then she lifted a shoulder in a small shrug as if to say, "What can I do?" Ethan returned his gaze, unblinking. Then he pointed to the tablet and slowly, deliberately, drew a circle in the air with his finger as if to say, "Check again." Clara's lips tightened. She turned away. Maria placed a small glass of sparkling water near the counter's edge, an offering no one asked for and no one would accept. Her voice trembled in her chest. She thought of the night her father came home with a swollen jaw because a supervisor had called him a name and then docked his pay for insubordination when he refused to answer to it. She thought of the way he had smiled anyway and said, "God sees. We keep showing up." She looked at Ethan and felt the sharp ache of recognition. Richard clapped his hands once. "Security on standby," he announced, without actually calling anyone. The performance would be enough. We can't have disruptions. Robert finally moved. "Richard," he said, louder now. "This is not a disruption. This is a passenger. Let me scan the pass and end this." Richard's eyes flashed. "Do you want the company to praise you for being soft?" he asked. "Or to promote you for holding the line?" Robert's mouth opened, then closed. He looked at the doors, at Ethan, at the staff. The silence felt like a verdict, and he had delivered it himself. Outside, a gust of wind drove the rain sideways. It sprayed Ethan's sleeve and cheek. He blinked the water away, then checked the time again. He could feel anger pacing in a narrow hallway inside his chest. Back and forth, back and forth. He let it walk. He did not let it speak. He took a breath and sent a short text. Not yet a call. A seat in the ground. Not a flare in the sky. Jamal lowered his phone for a second and pressed his back to the cool column. He could feel his heartbeat in his palms. He thought of last year when a friend of his, also on ground crew, had been disciplined for raising a concern about a supervisor who mocked accents. The message had been clear. Keep your head down. Keep your phone in your pocket. Keep your truth to yourself. But the lens called to him. The truth wanted a witness. He lifted the phone again. Clara returned to the counter and leaned toward Melissa. "If he is not on the manifest?" "He is not on the manifest," she said, as if repeating it made it more true. "I am not risking an incident at the gate." Melissa nodded too quickly. "Of course," she murmured. "Policy." Maria stared at the women, her chest rising and falling like she had just run a flight of stairs. "May I speak with him?" she asked, voice small, "just to check his ticket myself." Richard laughed. "And say what?" "Sweetheart," he asked. "Sorry, sir. You look the part, but you don't fit the list." His smile stretched thin. "No, stay where you are." Maria felt her face burn. She looked down at her hands and counted silently in Spanish until the heat cooled. Ethan stepped closer to the glass and let the doors open once more. He did not cross the threshold. He stood at the line as the warm air washed over him. "Mr. Hale," he said, using the formal address deliberately. "Is your decision final?" Richard glanced up, savoring the moment. "It is," he said. "Step away from the entrance. You are blocking my guests." Ethan nodded once. "Thank you," he said, "for the clarity." He let the doors close again. The storm reclaimed him. Inside the lounge, the quiet felt like dust. It coated the coffee beans, the leather chairs, the glass display of imported cookies that no one ever really ate. Even the flight monitors seemed to dim. Robert looked at Melissa. Melissa looked at Clara. Clara looked at Richard. Richard looked at his reflection and admired a man who believed he had won. And then, as if cued by an orchestra no one could see, the weather shifted, the rain softened, the gray outside lightened to a cool silver. Somewhere on the far side of the concourse, a low siren wailed once, short and distant, then faded. Jamal's camera found Ethan's face again. There was no panic there, no pleading, only resolve. He put his phone away and straightened his shoulders. The next step would not be loud. It would be precise. He had been here before in 100 different rooms. He knew exactly what to do. The rain turned soft, then hard, then soft again, as if the sky could not decide whether to comfort or punish. Under the awning, Ethan watched the drops beat along the edge, gather their courage, and leap. Each bead fell, met the tile, and broke into a dozen smaller lives. He found himself timing his breaths to that small ritual. In, gather, out, release, from inside the lounge. The hum of conversation returned in cautious threads. Forks chimed against plates. A milk steamer hissed. Someone laughed, quick and brittle. The sound reminded him of boardroom chuckles that hid knives. He had learned to listen not for what people said, but for what they wanted to get away with. A baggage tug rolled past, a rectangle of yellow light sweeping over the glass. In the reflection, he caught his own outline and the ghost of the jets beyond. He stood a fraction taller. His posture was habit by now, but it was also a choice. He would not shrink to fit a lie. He slid his phone from his inside pocket, shielding it from the drizzle with his palm. A few rain dots freckled the screen. He wiped them with his cuff, then scrolled to a contact labeled simply Ops. He hovered. Not yet. He needed the most efficient outcome, the one that solved more than a single insult. He needed more than proof. He needed pattern, context, and witnesses who would never again mistake silence for safety. A memory came uninvited. Detroit, late afternoon, the light slanting gold across the cracked sidewalk. He was 12, wearing a hand-me-down jacket with a broken zipper. The corner store bell rang when he walked in. Red and blue wrappers lined the candy aisle. like flags of a country he did not yet belong to. He touched a caramel bar. Just touched it. The clerk shouted from the counter without looking up. "Do not steal! Boy!" The words snapped like a twig underfoot. He put both hands in the air, heart banging against his ribs for reasons he could not name, and backed away. He had left without buying the milk his mother asked for. He had walked home with empty hands and full shame and said the store was out. His mother had looked at him for a long time, then kissed his forehead and whispered, "Do not let the world decide your worth." Not then, not later. He had not understood how to do that. Yet, he understood now. His Rolls-Royce sat across the service road, a patient animal waiting in the rain. The chrome spirit at the hood tip flashed and dimmed under the passing floodlights. He remembered driving it off the lot the day his second fund closed. Not for the car itself, but for the promise he made to the boy he used to be. One day, you will walk into any room. One day, you will be the man who opens the door. Behind him, the lounge doors sighed open and shut. He did not turn to look, but he felt the eyes on his back, the measuring and the certainty and the story people told themselves to sleep well. He exhaled and let those eyes slide off. Inside. Maria Lopez stood with her palms flat on the counter, fingers spread, her nails short. She could not quiet the chapel of her chest. The small glass of sparkling water she had placed there remained untouched. Her thoughts kept circling the same fear. If I speak, I might lose everything. If I do not speak, what part of me will I lose anyway? She looked at Ethan. She had never seen dignity perform itself so quietly. Robert Miles wandered to the entry checkpoint again. The scanner light green, then blue, then green. 20 years had taught him how storms blow through an airport. This storm was different. It was a weather system with a memory. It would not pass on its own. He rubbed the joint at the base of his thumb, the place that ached in cold months. He made a decision without announcing it to himself. He would not move again without looking. Jamal Reed remained behind the column, the phone steady now. His first minutes of recording had been shaky with adrenaline. The frame had clipped chair backs and elbows and the glossy edge of a magazine rack. He steadied his breath the way his cousin taught him for free throws. In, hold, out. Now the image was clean. It took in the doorway, Ethan in profile under the awning, Richard's posture at the counter, Clara's sharp triangles of movement, Melissa's fidgeting hands, Maria's fixed attention. The camera translated 1,000 small choices into one large truth. 2 teenage boys in hoodies jogged past on the concourse side, laughing about a game. The shorter one glanced at Ethan, then at the lounge sign, then at his friend. His smile wilted for a second, then reattached. Jamal caught that flicker too. Small truths become large ones. Ethan opened his messages and typed 4 words to Daniel Cross, the airline's chief operating officer. Gate C7. Stand by. He hit send. Then he typed 3 more, shorter still. To Ryan Hughes, head of security, eyes on cameras. He hit send again. The text felt like adjusting the sails of a boat before the wind rises. The glass doors parted. Clara approached again. Tablet pressed against her ribs. Her shoes did not squeak. Ethan looked at her and waited. She stopped at the threshold, refused to step into the rain. Her chin tilted. "Sir," she said, voice smooth as cold water, "our manifest still does not show your name. I am giving you one last opportunity to relocate to the main terminal." Ethan did not step forward. He did not raise his voice. "One last opportunity," he said, "for you to correct your error." He let the sentence hang for a beat, and to correct your assumptions." Clara's eyes flashed, but she could not find a reply that would not expose its own motives. She pivoted and walked back inside, shoes whispering against the tile. Melissa Grant finally typed a real query. A box popped up, routine and unexciting. She stared at it as if a confession had appeared. It had not. It had asked her to press enter. She did not press it. Her breath went shallow. She imagined Richard's mouth curving when she handed him an inconvenient truth. She imagined her supervisor's email the next morning, coded but clear, not a team player. She imagined her rent. She hovered over enter and then moved her finger away. She was not ready to betray a lie. Maria slid the water back from the edge before someone knocked it over. Not yet, she told herself. But when, if not this, then what? She closed her eyes for a second and saw her father's swollen jaw again, his gentle smile making room for hurt. She opened her eyes. Hotter now, she whispered so softly no one could hear. "I am not a ghost." Richard Hale stretched his shoulders, feeling taller inside his suit. He had crafted a story about himself over the years, a story where he protected the brand from intruders and cut corners for the right kind of guest. The story made a hero of him. Heroes, in his telling, did not hesitate. He lifted his chin now and told the room, "Security will be here in 2 minutes." He had not called them. He liked the way the sentence felt on his tongue. Ethan watched his reflection breathe. He thought again of his mother's voice, low and steady in their small kitchen. "Do not let the world decide your worth." He nodded once, to no one. Then he pressed a new contact. Lauren, his executive chief of staff. The call rang once. She answered, "Ethan, activate crisis protocol." He said, "JFK, gate C7. Her voice sharpened without rising. "On it. Loop Daniel and Ryan. 10-minute window. Confirmed." He ended the call. He did not look at the doors. He pocketed the phone and clasped his hands loosely. A man waiting for an elevator, not a man standing in the rain. Jamal's camera trembled only once now, not from fear, but from anticipation gathering its weight. He aimed for faces, Maria's eyes, Melissa's hands, Robert's jaw, Richard's smile, Clara's pace. He captured the clock on the wall and the second hand saying very plainly what time it was. Robert moved again, this time with purpose. He stood at the scanner and raised his voice enough to be heard without sounding like a challenge. "Mr. Hale, allow me to scan the passenger's boarding pass. We resolve this in 60 seconds. Richard turned, dragged the smile back onto his face. "Stand down. Robert, we do not need your heroics." "It is not heroics," Robert said, and surprised himself with how firm it sounded. "It is procedure." The word hung between them like a rope thrown across a gap. Richard did not take hold. Ethan felt a current pass through the space. He could sense the room tilting toward its own verdict. Not yet, he told himself again. Then he allowed himself a small mercy. He stepped forward until the sensor opened the doors and sent a wave of warm air over him. He stopped at the line, half in and half out, and looked at Richard. "Is your decision still final?" he asked. No heat, no tremor, just the question. Clean. Richard met his eyes. He enjoyed this part most. "It is," he said. "Step away from the entrance." "Thank you," Ethan said. "For the clarity?" He stepped back into the rain. Behind him, Maria made a sound like a breath breaking. A minute stretched. Somewhere in the concourse a child squealed, delighted by puddles. The espresso hissed again. Someone said, Boarding begins in 20. In the distance, a siren grew louder, then nearer, then close. Jamal adjusted the frame and caught the reflection of black SUVs turning onto the service lane beyond the glass. Headlights slicing through the rain like certainty arriving. He kept recording. Ethan did not turn. He did not need to. He knew the engine notes of his own plan. He squared his shoulders and prepared to walk through the door he had just been told did not exist. The clock above the glass doors ticked past 8:45 p.m. The rain no longer fell in sheets, but in thick silver cords, each drop smacking the pavement with a sound that carried into the lounge every time the doors sighed open. Ethan stood just beyond the awning, half lit by the fluorescence overhead, rain tracing lines across his face. He had not moved since the call. He did not need to. The storm was already shifting. From the service road came the growl of engines, deep and synchronized. Not like the usual chatter of airport traffic. Black SUVs rolled into view, headlights piercing the curtain of rain, their wipers beating in unison. The first vehicle braked hard, tires slicing water across the pavement. The doors opened. Out stepped men in dark suits, jackets already soaked but movements crisp, as if the weather were background noise and nothing more. Security, unmistakable. Inside, the lounge stilled. Conversations clipped mid-sentence. Glasses set down too quickly rattled against coasters. The espresso machine hissed one last time, then went quiet. Richard Hale's smirk flickered, a small betrayal of nerves. Clara Monroe tightened her jaw, chin lifting higher as if posture could defend her authority. Melissa Grant's fingers hovered above her keyboard but froze. Maria Lopez pressed her palms flat against the counter again, heart racing. Robert Miles adjusted his stance, torn between the rules he knew and the courage he'd only just rediscovered. Jamal Reed's phone stayed steady, lens catching the moment like a net gathering truth. The lead SUV door swung open. Daniel Cross, Chief Operating Officer, stepped into the rain. His presence cut sharper than the storm itself. Tall frame, coat unbuttoned, gaze fixed directly on Ethan. He did not rush. He walked the distance with calm strides, security flanking him in a protective arc. Behind him, Ryan Hughes, head of security, carried a tablet under one arm, his expression grave, every step measured. Daniel stopped at the edge of the awning. Ethan, he said simply, his voice carrying through the storm. Report. Ethan did not raise his voice. Denied entry, he said. Told to wait outside. Accused of fraud. He paused, letting the words fall with the rain. In front of my own staff. Ryan scanned the lounge with sharp eyes. His team fanned to the edges, already plugging into cameras, already pulling feeds. Jamal stepped forward, raising his phone without hesitation. I recorded everything, he said, voice trembling but steady. He offered it to Ryan, who took it with a curt nod. Multiple angles confirm, Ryan said after a glance at his tablet. We have timestamps, audio, and external feeds. The case is airtight. Inside. Richard's chest swelled with forced bravado. He stepped toward the glass doors, motioning to Clara and Melissa as if they were allies in a stage play. This is unnecessary, he called out, raising his voice to be heard over the rain. We were following procedure, verifying credentials. That's all. Daniel turned his head slowly, eyes narrowing. Procedure, he repeated. You waved 3 other passengers through without a glance. Did you scan their IDs? Did you question their right to sit inside? His voice was calm, but laced with iron. Or was procedure only for him? Silence spread across the lounge like spilled ink. Claire's lips parted, but no words came. Melissa stared at the floor, her screen casting a pale blue light across her face. Maria shifted, tears close but not yet falling. Robert cleared his throat, his voice rough but clear. "He's right. I saw it. They walked through. He was stopped." Richard's face tightened. His eyes darted toward Melissa. The system flagged his name. He snapped, "That's what we were waiting on." Melissa's mouth opened, but nothing emerged. Jamal's video, Ryan's feeds. Robert's words, everyone contradicted the lie before it left her lips. Her silence was louder than truth. Clara stepped forward, eyes sharp as blades. "We cannot let anyone approach a private gate unchecked," she said, clinging to certainty. "That's not prejudice. That's policy." Ethan's gaze was steady, his tone low. Policy is consistency. If you enforce it for one, you enforce it for all. What you enforced tonight wasn't policy. It was perception, and perception was built on the color of my skin. The sentence landed heavy, undeniable. A murmur rippled among lounge staff who had gathered at the edges, their eyes wide, their silence complicit. Maria pressed a trembling hand to her chest, whispering, "He's right," so faintly only she could hear it. Daniel exhaled once. He turned toward the room, his voice carrying across tile and glass. "Every person in this lounge hear this clearly. The man you denied entry tonight is Ethan Cole, founder, majority shareholder, CEO, the man who built the company that owns this terminal, this lounge, and the very aircraft waiting outside. You told him he didn't belong." He paused, letting the weight of the revelation press into every chest. "Now explain yourselves." Richard's jaw slackened. Clara's smirk drained into silence. Melissa's hand shook above her keyboard, frozen in shame. Maria's breath caught. Robert bowed his head, regret carving lines deeper across his face. Jamal zoomed in on the reactions, capturing every twitch, every collapse of certainty. Ethan stepped forward into the glow of the lounge lights, rain dripping from his jacket onto the polished floor. He did not shout. His words were steady, measured, each one carrying the gravity of years. "You told me to wait outside. You told me I did not belong. And you believed your prejudice carried more weight than truth. But truth has arrived, and it stands in front of you now." No one moved. No one breathed too loudly. The storm outside had quieted, but inside the lounge, the air was thick with reckoning. Daniel broke the silence. "Effective immediately, Richard Hale, Clara Monroe, Melissa Grant, you are relieved of duty. Security will escort you from this facility. You will not step foot in Cole Aviation property again." Ryan signaled his team. 2 men moved forward, calm but unyielding. Richard sputtered, his words crumbling under panic. "You'll regret this. I've protected this brand for years. You're throwing it away." His voice cracked, anger dissolving into desperation. Clara tried to stand taller, but her legs betrayed her, trembling beneath her rigid posture. Melissa whispered, I just did what I was told." But even she didn't believe the excuse anymore. Ethan did not flinch. "The only regret," he said softly, "is that I trusted you to represent a company that values dignity. That trust ends tonight." As security guided the 3 out, eyes lowered, Maria finally found her courage. She stepped forward, voice shaking but strong enough to carry. "I knew it was wrong," she confessed. "I stayed silent, but I won't again." Her admission cracked the silence wide open. Others shifted, some nodding faintly, some ashamed, some relieved. Ethan turned to her. His expression softened, a fraction warmer. "Courage is never late," he said. "What matters is what you do next." Robert lifted his chin, voice low but firm. "I'll speak, too. I should have stepped in sooner. That's on me." His confession hung heavy, a reminder that injustice is fed as much by silence as by cruelty. Ethan nodded once, noted, and remembered. Daniel looked around the lounge. "This is not just about tonight. This is about every night like it. Every moment that passed unseen because people thought it was safer to stay quiet. That ends here. That ends now. Outside." Thunder rolled one last time, low and distant, as if the storm itself acknowledged the shift. Ethan stood still in the center of the lounge, rainwater pooling at his feet, yet his presence was unshaken. What began as humiliation was becoming transformation. He looked at Jamal's camera, at Maria's trembling hands, at Robert's bowed head, and at the empty space where Richard, Clara, and Melissa had stood. This was not over. This was the beginning. For a long second, no one in the lounge moved. The sound of the rain outside seemed to vanish, replaced by the low hum of 100 phones buzzing in pockets and purses. The atmosphere was charged, brittle, as if one more breath might fracture it all into 1,000 shards. Jamal Reed lowered his phone just enough to glance at the screen. He had not stopped recording since the first confrontation. The counter showed 37 minutes of continuous footage, 37 minutes of humiliation, defiance, silence, revelation, and now dismissal. He swallowed, thumb hovering over the screen. Should he keep this for evidence, or should he press one more button? His chest ached with the weight of the choice. "Send it," he whispered under his breath, almost as if asking permission from the storm itself. His thumb tapped, and the video flew first to his group chat with cousins, then to social feeds he hadn't updated in months. Within minutes, the storm inside the lounge began to spread outward. Maria Lopez noticed first. Her phone vibrated with a notification, then 2, then 5 in quick succession. She unlocked it, breath-catching. On her screen, the video of Ethan standing in the rain, dignified and silent, was already gaining traction. Comments scrolled faster than she could read. "This is unbelievable. How many times will this happen before it stops? That man is stronger than the system trying to break him." She looked up at Ethan. He hadn't checked his phone once. He simply stood there, eyes steady, posture calm, as if rooted to the very floor. He didn't need to chase validation. The truth was already flowing outward like electricity on a live wire. Ryan Hughes leaned toward Daniel Cross, lowering his voice. "It's out," he said. "Every platform. Jamal's video. I've already got media inquiries pinging our servers." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Good," he said. "Let the world see what happens when truth collides with arrogance." He looked at Ethan. "This is bigger than an airport lounge now." Ethan finally shifted, pulling his phone from his jacket. He wasn't surprised to see the notifications lighting up, his name trending, the company name trending, the video being shared, dissected, amplified. His thumb hovered above the screen for a moment. Then he locked it without reading further. His gaze lifted to the staff gathered inside. "You all wanted to decide who belonged," he said softly, voice carrying through the lounge. "Now the world will decide what belongs to you." Melissa Grant sat down hard, her face drained. She stared at her screen as the numbers climbed: likes, shares, angry emojis filling her notifications. She imagined the faces of her colleagues, her family, seeing her name attached to the night's disgrace. The excuses she rehearsed in her mind began to sound hollow, even to herself. Clara Monroe stood rigid, chin still lifted, though her eyes darted toward the windows as if searching for an exit that didn't exist. Richard Hale's absence weighed heavy. Even without him, the arrogance he embodied lingered like smoke after a fire. Maria's breath grew uneven. She stepped closer to Ethan, voice trembling. "It's everywhere," she whispered. "You're trending in 20 states already." Ethan gave a faint nod. "Let it. Truth doesn't need a press release. It only needs light." The words sank deep into Maria's chest, filling spaces she hadn't realized were empty. For the first time all evening, she felt something stir beneath the fear, something like pride. Jamal's phone buzzed furiously. He glanced down. "Bro, you're on CNN." Another message. Fox picked it up. Another. "Your video just hit 1 million views." His hands shook, not from fear now, but from the sheer velocity of what he had unleashed. He looked at Ethan, guilt nibbling the edges of his pride. "I didn't mean to." "You did what was needed," Ethan interrupted, his tone neither harsh nor forgiving. "Simply true. Truth can't stay buried. You opened the door." Outside, the storm shifted again. Rain slowed to a mist, clouds thinning to reveal patches of moonlight. The glass walls of the lounge reflected the glow, casting Ethan in pale silver light. Passengers pressed against the windows of the terminal across the concourse, phones raised, some streaming live, others snapping photos. The incident was no longer confined to this corner of the airport. It was theater, history, evidence all unfolding in real time. Robert Miles finally found his voice again. He cleared his throat, his words steady this time. "People will ask why no one stepped in sooner. They'll ask why we let it happen." His gaze moved across the room, resting briefly on Maria, then back to Ethan. "I don't have an answer that excuses me, but I'll give them the truth. I froze, and I won't freeze again." Ethan studied him, his expression unreadable for a moment. Then he gave the smallest nod. "Then make sure your next act is worthy of the silence you held tonight." Robert swallowed hard, but he nodded back. Daniel's phone buzzed again. He scanned it quickly, then turned to Ethan. "The board's requesting an emergency call. Media is circling the airport. Federal regulators will want a briefing before morning. You've got momentum. What's the play?" Ethan's eyes darkened, his calm now sharpened by purpose. "We don't just react. We define. This isn't about me. It's about every person who's been told to wait outside, who's been measured and dismissed by someone else's bias. Tonight, we show them what happens when dignity refuses to bow." The room was silent. Even those who had once smirked or turned away now felt the gravity of his words pulling them inward. Maria whispered, almost to herself. He turned humiliation into history. Ethan looked at her, and for the first time that evening, allowed the faintest smile to touch his lips. "Not history," he corrected gently. "A beginning." The lounge doors opened again. 2 more security officers stepped inside, radios crackling. One of them spoke quickly to Ryan, who listened, nodded, and turned to Ethan. "The press is gathering outside the main terminal entrance. They're demanding a statement. If you want to speak, this is the moment." Ethan inhaled deeply, the memory of his mother's words rising again like a tide. "Do not let the world decide your worth." He looked at Daniel, then at Ryan, then at Maria and Jamal. "They decided who I was tonight. Now I'll show them who I am." He stepped forward, water still dripping from his coat, shoes leaving faint prints across the polished floor. The staff parted silently, as though recognizing that the path belonged to him now. The doors opened wide, and he walked into the corridor of light, toward the terminal where the world was waiting. Behind him, Maria wiped her eyes and whispered, "Don't let them twist it. Show them." Jamal steadied his phone again, capturing Ethan's back as he strode toward the cameras. The lens trembled, but not from fear this time. It trembled from awe. The corridor outside the lounge opened into a long ribbon of polished floor and high windows that framed the night like a living photograph. Cameras were already gathering near the main terminal entrance, red tally lights winking to life, boom mics rising like sails. Passengers slowed, then clustered, pulled by the same gravity that follows a truth too big to ignore. Ethan Cole walked with an unhurried gait, water still falling in quiet taps from the hem of his coat. Daniel Cross and Ryan Hughes flanked him at a respectful distance. Security formed a loose ring that looked more like a promise than a barrier. Jamal followed a few paces back, phone raised, framing the shot with careful hands. Maria Lopez and Robert Miles stayed near the lounge threshold, unable to move farther, but unable to look away. At the base of a column near the entrance, a small podium stood waiting, the kind that appears when airports need announcements about weather delays or gate changes. Tonight, it seemed to hold an altogether different weather. Reporters pressed forward. A woman with a navy blazer and a calm voice called out, "Mr. Cole, did they know who you were?" Another voice layered in. Was this racially motivated? Then another. "Are you pressing charges?" The questions multiplied, colliding and cracking like hail. Ethan stopped at the podium and rested both palms lightly on its edge. He did not lean in. He did not clear his throat. When he spoke, his voice carried with a natural microphone, steady and warm enough to still the bustle around him. "Tonight," he said, "I was told to wait outside. I was told I didn't belong." A hush rippled outward. Phones lifted higher. Even the overhead announcements seemed to yield him a quiet second. He continued, "I was not denied because of policy. I was denied because of perception. That perception was shaped by bias. And bias is not a storm you can wait out. It's a climate you have to change." A marble of silence rolled across the concourse. Someone exhaled sharply. A baby settled against a shoulder and stopped fussing, as if listening too. Ethan's gaze swept the cameras, then settled beyond them, on the travelers craning their necks and the ground crew who had drifted closer, still in orange vests with radio cords snaking from their collars. "I want to be very clear," he said. "This isn't about my title. It isn't about the size of my position or the number of shares I own. If my dignity requires a business card to be valid, it isn't dignity. What happened tonight happens to people who do not have press at the door. It happens in smaller rooms, with no recording, with no one to correct the story. And it ends with shame settling into the chest like a permanent tenant." A reporter stepped forward. "What do you plan to do now?" Ethan nodded once, as if he had been waiting for that specific question. "We are taking immediate action. First, the employees directly responsible have been relieved of duty. That's accountability. Second, and more importantly, we are implementing structural changes that make accountability unnecessary because bias will have nowhere to hide." Daniel's head tilted toward him. Ryan's jaw tightened in approval. The reporters leaned in as if a door had opened. "Starting tonight," Ethan said, "we are suspending operations at Gate C7 for 2 hours while we convene an on-site briefing and training for all crew assigned to the upcoming first-class departure. Those 2 hours will be the most valuable hours this gate has ever held. We will walk through what happened. We will understand not just who acted, but why others felt they could not speak. A murmur spread through the traveling crowd. The practical reality landed. Delays, missed connections. A man in a ball cap lifted his hands in a small gesture of frustration, then lowered them slowly. Listening, Ethan went on. We will also begin rolling out Equity Shield. This is a real-time system that helps us detect discriminatory patterns in communication and decision-making. Not to punish people with gotchas, but to surface the blind spots we all carry and correct them before they cause harm. A reporter raised a hand. Mr. Cole, that's artificial intelligence. Will you be monitoring employees' emails? Ethan's answer was unhurried. We will monitor systems and interactions where decisions are made that affect people's dignity and safety. Transparency protects the good and reforms the careless. Our intention is not surveillance. Our intention is fairness. Another question flew. What about travelers who are delayed? What do you say to those who are missing flights tonight because of this? 2 things, Ethan said. First, I'm sorry. Second, we'll take care of you. Food vouchers, hotel rooms if needed, rebooking with priority. But I'd ask you to consider this. A delay at a gate can be inconvenient. A delay in justice can be generational. The time we spend now saves time 1,000 times over. The man in the ball cap nodded slowly, almost to himself. A woman in a winter coat touched her chest and whispered, Amen, not as a performance but as a quiet assent. Daniel stepped forward with a tablet, eyes scanning updates streaming in from operations. We're clear to pause at C7, he said softly. Angled, so the mics did not catch it. Crew assembled within 15 minutes. We can pull adjacent gate staff to increase the reach. Ethan gave a small nod, then looked back to the press. There's one more thing. We will establish a justice fund for employees and passengers who have experienced bias in our spaces. That fund will provide legal support, mental health care, and practical assistance. If our halls injured you, our halls will help heal you. We won't wait for a hashtag to do right by people. O.R. Ryan's radio crackled. He listened, then leaned in. Local outlets want a live cut-in. He said, National is following. Ethan did not chase the cameras. He held them with the same calm that had held the door against him earlier. To anyone watching, he said, who has been told to wait outside, who has been told you don't belong. I can't rewrite every night you carried that pain home. I can promise this. In spaces I lead, the rain won't be the last word. You will not be asked to prove your dignity at the door. He stepped back from the podium. Reporters shouted follow-ups, but he lifted a hand in a courteous stop. We have work to do, he said simply, and I won't talk about it longer than I act on it. As he turned, a small ripple of applause rose from the concourse. It wasn't loud. It wasn't theatrical. It sounded like people who weren't sure if clapping in an airport was a thing, but who could not hold their hands still. Jamal's video tracked Ethan's exit. The applause. The way a few ground crew members stood straighter after hearing words that sounded like protection instead of blame. Maria wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand. Robert exhaled the breath he felt he had been holding for 20 years. Melissa and Claire were nowhere in sight. Richard had already been taken away, his absence like an open door that let the wind move through the room differently. Ethan walked back toward the lounge, toward gate C7. As he passed Maria and Robert, he paused. You two, he said softly. Come with us. Maria's eyes widened. Me you, Ethan said, because you felt the pull to speak, and because it cost something to follow that pull. Robert squared his shoulders. I'm ready, he said. No more stepping back. Ryan spoke into his radio. Assemble all crew from C7 in the aircraft cabin. 15 minutes. He glanced at Ethan. You want legal in the room? Yes. Ethan said. Have Karen Whitfield join. Bring a projector, audio, and access to the camera feeds. Jamal's footage, too. Jamal blinked. My footage. Your footage, Ethan said. Truth organized is a lesson. Tonight we will learn. They moved as a small convoy down the concourse. Travelers turned to watch. Phones rising again. But the energy had shifted. This was not a march of outrage. It was the walk of people who had decided to repair the place they stood in. As they reached the jet bridge to C7, the storm outside thinned to a gauze and began to drift. The aircraft sat at the gate with its beacon light pulsing a patient red. Inside the cabin, a few crew members had already taken seats along the aisle, whispering. The strange quiet that comes before a meeting you did not expect, but that you know you need, settled in the air. Ethan paused at the top of the jet bridge and looked back down the corridor. The lounge gleamed behind glass in the middle distance. He could almost see the exact spot where he had been told to wait outside, where Rain had tried to write his place in the story. He let his eyes rest there for one breath. Then he turned and stepped onto the aircraft. Daniel followed, then Ryan, then Maria and Robert and Jamal. A few more staff filed in, faces drawn, eyes bright. A flight attendant, the one assigned to first class tonight, rose quickly and opened a storage compartment to pull a small screen down. Another crew member checked the overhead speakers and nodded. The room was ready. Ethan set his palm on the back of the first-class seat nearest the aisle. He did not sit. Thank you for coming, he said, voice low. This is not a punishment. This is a beginning. We will watch what happened. We will speak. We will decide how we will be different the next time a storm tries to tell us who belongs. Ryan placed Jamal's phone on the armrest, cabled to the screen. The opening frame filled the cabin, the lounge doors, the rain beyond. A man in a navy suit standing still with a boarding pass in his hand. A few gasps slipped out before people caught themselves. Ethan looked around the room, catching eyes without accusation. Before we press play, he said, hear this first. Courage is not optional in this company. That includes the courage to interrupt a colleague when a line is crossed. Silence is not neutral. It sides with harm. We will not side with harm. He nodded to Ryan. Begin. The screen brightened. The first words from the recording were as cruel as they had been the first time. Step outside. You don't belong here. Some in the cabin flinched. Maria looked down at her hands, then lifted her head and kept it there. Robert braced his elbows on his knees. Jamal watched the faces instead of the frame, memorizing the change that happens when a person witnesses their own house in a mirror. Outside, the last threads of rain lifted from the tarmac like a curtain. The cabin lights dimmed to a soft glow, the kind used before takeoff to quiet restless passengers. Except tonight. There were no passengers, no luggage crammed in overhead bins, only crew members, supervisors, and a few leaders, sitting shoulder to shoulder in silence. The first-class section had become an impromptu courtroom, a classroom, and a confessional, all at once. On the screen, Jamal's video played in real time, the lounge doors sliding open and shut. Richard Hale's posture at the counter, stiff with arrogance. Clara Monroe's clipped words, the ones that still rang sharp. Step outside. You don't belong here. The hush inside the cabin deepened. A younger flight attendant, no more than 24, covered her mouth. She really said that she whispered. Her colleague beside her nodded grimly. Maria Lopez sat toward the aisle, twisting her hands in her lap, Hearing the words again pulled her back to that moment, to the sting in her chest when she hadn't spoken. Her throat ached with the memory of silence. Robert Miles leaned forward, elbows on knees, eyes fixed on the screen. Every line of his face carried years of routines, checklists, a habit of keeping things smooth. He could see now how that smoothness had become complicity. He whispered, almost to himself, "Procedure is no excuse." When the footage reached the part where Ethan stood in the rain, calm as stone, the cabin seemed to hold its breath. Drops slid from his shoulders, his boarding pass in hand, dignity intact, even as others tried to strip it away. Several attendants shifted uncomfortably in their seats, as if they were watching their own reflection in a mirror they hadn't agreed to face. The video ended. Ryan Hughes disconnected the cable, leaving the screen dark. For a few beats, the silence was heavier than any engine roar. Ethan Cole stepped forward, his presence filling the aisle without force. "You've seen it," he said, voice quiet, but carrying. "Now I want to hear you." No one moved. Then a hand rose tentatively near the back. It was the young flight attendant. Her cheeks flushed. I've worked here 2 years, she said. I thought stuff like this was in the past. Seeing it, hearing it, it makes me realize I was naive. We let it happen right in front of us." Her eyes flicked toward Maria, then down to the floor. "I don't ever want to be part of silence like that." Maria's throat tightened. She found her courage and spoke, voice shaking. "I froze. I wanted to help, but I thought I'd lose my job. Watching it again, I realized I lost something more important. I lost a piece of myself." She lifted her chin, tears shining. "Next time, I won't." Ethan's gaze softened. "That's why we're here. Not to punish fear, but to transform it. Fear tells you to wait until someone else acts. Courage tells you the moment is already yours." Robert straightened, his deep voice steady now. "I knew better. I didn't act. That's on me. But I'll say this silence didn't protect me tonight. It condemned me." The words carried weight, the kind that lingers after the sound fades. Others nodded, some reluctantly, some with relief that someone had put their guilt into words. Daniel Cross stepped in, tablet under his arm. "This is not about replacing one set of employees with another. It's about changing the culture, so this never repeats. If you think tonight was just about one mistake, you've missed the point. This is about habit, about how small choices accumulate into harm." A murmur moved through the crew. They knew he was right. They had felt those small choices before ignored comments, subtle preferences, unspoken assumptions. Tonight, they had been forced to see the cost. When those choices aligned into open discrimination, Ethan looked around the cabin, eyes settling on each face. "We will not be perfect," he said, "but we will be accountable. From now on, every crew member has the authority and the obligation to stop a moment like this as it begins. Rank won't shield anyone. Policy won't excuse anyone. Silence won't protect anyone." The younger attendant raised her hand again. "What if we make mistakes? Then we learn," Ethan replied. "But we do not hide. We do not wait outside while someone else pays the price for our hesitation." Maria exhaled slowly, a tremor leaving her shoulders. Robert nodded once, a soldier receiving an order he intended to follow this time. Jamal lowered his phone, realizing the story no longer needed his recording. It was already etching itself into the people in the room. Ryan Hughes stepped forward. "We'll pair every crew member with accountability partners. You'll check each other, not just for procedures, but for integrity. We'll use the footage tonight as a training module across the company. And yes, there will be audits. Not to shame, but to sharpen, Daniel added. This will be written into contracts. Promotions will factor in not just technical performance, but moral courage. It won't be optional. The murmurs rose again, this time steadier. The idea of courage as part of the job formalized, measured felt strange, but also clarifying. Ethan let them process, then spoke one last time. Understand this. What happened tonight could have broken me. I chose to let it build us instead. The question is simple. Will you choose the same silence? Then a chorus of nods. Not applause, not cheering, just the sober agreement of people who had glimpsed their own fragility and wanted to step into strength. The session closed. Crew members stood slowly, some touching the seatbacks as if grounding themselves. Maria wiped her eyes but did not look away this time. Robert clasped her shoulder gently, a gesture of solidarity. The young attendant whispered to her colleague, "This changes everything." As people filed out, Ethan remained near the front of the cabin, eyes fixed on the dark screen. For a moment, he thought of his mother again, her voice low and steady. Do not let the world decide your worth. Tonight, he had turned those words outward, giving them to others to carry. Daniel approached. Press is waiting for follow-up. We'll need a statement about next steps. Ethan nodded, his voice calm. They'll hear it tomorrow. Tonight. The statement was made. He stepped off the aircraft, rain-washed tarmac stretching outside the jet bridge. The storm had passed, but the air still smelled of thunder. By dawn, the city was awake with headlines. Screens in Times Square replayed the clip of Ethan Cole standing in the rain, his dignity untouched by humiliation. News anchors dissected the footage in looping segments, the order to wait outside, the silent endurance, the SUVs pulling up like thunder on command. Millions had seen it. Millions were still sharing it. Inside the 40th floor boardroom of Cole Aviation headquarters, the mood was as heavy as the storm that had rolled through JFK the night before. Tall glass windows framed the skyline, the light gray of early morning spilling across polished wood and leather chairs. The long table was lined with executives, some tapping nervous fingers, others pretending to scroll notes on tablets. They knew what awaited them, not just a conversation, but a reckoning. Ethan entered quietly, without the theater of security or aides. He wore the same navy suit, pressed but still damp at the cuffs. The fatigue of the night traced faint lines across his face, but his presence was steady, undeniable. Behind him came Daniel Cross, Koo, carrying a slim folder, and Ryan Hughes, head of security, already scanning the room with sharp eyes. Karen Whitfield, the company's lead counsel, followed with her legal pad. She closed the heavy boardroom door with a quiet click that sounded like the closing of a vault. The chairman, an older man with silver hair and a stiff jawline, cleared his throat. Ethan, he began, the situation has spiraled quickly. The media storm is unlike anything we've faced. Our stock is already wobbling in pre-market trading. We need to consider measured responses. Ethan raised one hand. The room went still. He placed his palms flat on the table, leaning just enough to command attention without force. Measured responses, he repeated. That's what you call humiliation. That's what you call telling the CEO of this company to stand outside in the rain because his skin didn't match your assumptions. His voice was quiet, but no one mistook it for calm. It was the kind of quiet that carried a storm beneath it. No one answered. The weight of silence pressed on every chest. Karen opened her folder. sliding a packet of papers across the table. "We've compiled a timeline," she said, her voice precise, professional, with video evidence, eyewitness accounts, and internal reports. "The facts are not in dispute. The issue is how we respond." Ethan tapped the packet lightly, but didn't open it. "The facts are already public," he said. "The world has seen them. The issue is whether we'll pretend this is just bad optics, or admit it's a failure of culture." One of the board members shifted, clearing his throat. "With respect, Ethan, the employees involved have been terminated. Isn't that accountability enough? If we drag this out, terminating 3 employees doesn't repair decades of silence." Ethan interrupted. His gaze pinned the man until he looked down. "This isn't about dragging anything out. It's about deciding who we are. We can either react like a company embarrassed into compliance or lead like a company committed to justice." Daniel stepped forward, placing the folder he carried on the table. "We've outlined reforms," he said. "Equity shield, accountability partners, immediate retraining, a justice fund. These aren't slogans. They're structural, but they require unanimous board support to move forward." The chairman frowned. "Equity shield AI oversight, monitoring employee behavior in real time. That raises privacy concerns. The unions will resist. Regulators may." Karen interjected sharply. "What regulators will resist is ignoring the problem. The DOT and FAA will see this case as precedent-setting. If we lead with reforms, we frame the conversation. If we drag our feet, they'll impose changes we can't control." Ethan let the back and forth hang for a moment. Then he spoke, low but cutting. "I've invested my life into building this company. I've weathered markets, lawsuits, competitors, but nothing cuts deeper than watching my own house become a stage for humiliation. I will not allow it to stand. Not for me, not for anyone who walks into our gates." A woman at the far end of the table, usually reserved, leaned forward. "He's right. If we don't seize this moment, we'll be remembered for cowardice, for valuing convenience over dignity." Another board member, older, sighed. "This could destabilize operations." Ethan turned his gaze on him. "What destabilizes a company is when passengers, employees, and investors decide we can't be trusted. What stabilizes us is showing the world we'd rather lose a flight than lose our soul." The words landed like stones in a pond, rippling outward. Even those who wanted to resist felt the inevitability of his conviction. Ryan Hughes set his tablet down, voice steady. Security logs confirm patterns. This wasn't an isolated bias. We've documented at least 17 similar complaints in the past year, quietly filed, quietly dismissed. That stops now. We have the proof. We can't bury it anymore." The chairman's face tightened. His eyes flicked around the room, measuring support. He realized he didn't have enough. Slowly, grudgingly, he nodded. "Very well. You'll have your reforms. But Ethan, understand the magnitude of what you're doing. This isn't just training. It's reshaping the company from the ground up." Ethan straightened, his voice softening, though the steel beneath it remained. "Good. Because if the ground is cracked, you don't patch it. You rebuild it." Karen scribbled a final note, then looked up. "I'll draft the resolutions. We'll hold a press conference within 48 hours. Ethan, you'll lead it." Ethan nodded once. "Not just me. Maria Lopez and Robert Miles will stand beside me. They represent the employees who chose to speak after silence. And Jamal Reed's footage will be shown, unedited. The world will see that truth came not from power, but from courage at the margins." The boardroom fell silent again. But this time it was not avoidance, it was recognition. They knew history was shifting under their feet. Ethan stepped back, lifting his eyes toward the gray skyline. For a moment, he thought of his father's birthday coming soon, and of the toast he would give standing in the storm. It is not weakness, it is where you prove who you are. He turned back to the table. "Prepare yourselves," he said quietly. "The storm isn't over. It's moving to our doorstep, and we will meet it head-on." The boardroom emptied like a tide. Voices drifted down the hall, papers slid into folders, footsteps faded into carpet. When the door clicked shut, the quiet felt earned. Ethan Cole stood by the window a moment longer, watching the city brighten by degrees, as if daylight had decided to take its time with them. Daniel Cross waited near the table with Ryan Hughes and Karen Whitfield. No one asked Ethan what came next. They had learned that his silence did not mean uncertainty. It meant he was choosing the right size of word for the moment. "Bring Maria and Robert to my office," Ethan said at last. "Jamal, too, and have comms hold press until midday." Ryan nodded and stepped out. Karen closed her notebook. "I will have drafts on your desk within an hour." Daniel looked at Ethan. "You good?" Ethan's mouth curved. Not quite a smile. "I will be when they are." He crossed the corridor to his office. The space was large but not showy, with a long oak table facing a low bookshelf and a single-framed photo of his parents in their kitchen. His mother's hand on his father's shoulder, both of them mid-laugh. He ran a thumb along the frame. "Do not let the world decide your worth." It had been a sentence and a map. A soft knock. Ryan opened the door and ushered in Maria Lopez and Robert Miles. Jamal followed, a step behind, hands clasped around his phone like it was a fragile thing he had sworn to protect. Maria stopped 2 steps inside and stood very straight, as if her height might help hold together her composure. "Sir," she said, "thank you for asking me here." "Sit," Ethan said gently. "All of you." They settled at the table. Ryan took a place against the wall and kept still. For a moment, Ethan said nothing. He let the quiet do its work, not to intimidate them, but to make space for honesty to appear. Maria broke first, her words rushing to catch up with her courage. "I wanted to speak yesterday. I was so afraid. The rent, my brother's tuition. I told myself a dozen stories about why silence would be wise. I went home and told my mother I felt sick, and she made tea and kept saying, 'Dios te vi,' God sees. I kept hearing it, and I could not sleep. This morning, I asked myself what kind of woman I want to be when I am 40. I did not like the answer I was headed for." Ethan listened without interruption. "What is the answer now?" he asked. "I want to be someone who holds a door open," she said. "Not someone who watches a door stay closed and explains why she could not reach the handle." Robert nodded, eyes low. "That's the truth," he said quietly. "I worked 20 years thinking my job was to keep things calm. Calm turned into quiet. Quiet turned into looking away. I told myself I earned the right to avoid trouble after so many storms. What I really did was pass the storm to someone else while I stayed dry." Jamal shifted in his chair. "I never thought my video would be seen by anyone but a lawyer," he said. "And then it was everywhere. I was proud and scared at the same time. My cousin texted me one word: stand. I think I finally understand what he meant." Ethan rested both palms on the table. "When I was 12, he said, I walked out of a store without milk because a man's assumption took my voice from me. Last night, you gave it back, not to me alone, To every person who has tried to buy milk and felt accused by a room that never learned to see. Maria's eyes filled. Robert swallowed hard. Jamal blinked fast and nodded once. Ethan continued, softer now. There is a difference between guilt and accountability. Guilt keeps you staring at the floor. Accountability looks up and asks what work is mine to do. I am not interested in measuring your shame. I am interested in your work. Robert's shoulders straightened. Give it to me, he said. I want it. You will lead the first cohort of accountability partners, Ethan said, pairing junior crew with senior staff. You will build the habit of interruption. When bias shows its face, someone will say no out loud. Make it normal. Robert let out a breath that sounded like a vow. Yes, sir. Ethan turned to Maria. You will stand up the hotline and the Justice Fund intake, not as a punishment desk, as a place where truth finds its first audience. You will design it with the people who most need it, not the people most comfortable with it. That means part-time crew, contract workers, immigrants, parents, night shift. You will go where they are. Maria looked stunned, then certain, the shift teleporting across her features. I can do that, she said, voice steadying with each word. I want to do that. Ryan will assign you a team, Ethan said. With the right clearances, you will not have to stand alone. Jamal unclasped his hands. What about me? He asked. I do not know how to build a program. I only know how to press record. Ethan smiled for the first time that morning. You know how to tell the truth in a way that 1 million people could not look away. We will build an internal studio. We will take incidents and turn them into lessons. You will work with comms and training to make sure we are not afraid to see ourselves. I want the footage from last night edited into a module by next week. Faces of passengers blurred, facts intact, no music. The event will not be made pretty. Jamal's chin lifted. No pretty, he echoed softly. Yes. Ethan glanced at Ryan. What else? He asked. Ryan stepped forward. There is one more thing we found, he said carefully. It matters. He placed a printed screenshot on the table, an internal HR ticket number at the top. Under it, a short note. Lounge manager used degrading language toward passenger last month. Witness M. Lopez. Outcome closed. Insufficient evidence. Maria stared at the page like it had stepped out of a dream she had tried to forget. I filed that, she whispered. I filed it, and Melissa told me it was nothing. She said the system did not allow anonymous submissions. She said next time bring it to her in person. I knew there would not be a next time. Ethan's eyes narrowed, not with anger's heat, but with justice's precision. There will be a next time, he said, and it will not be handled by the person who closes the door. He slid the screenshot back to Ryan. Audit every closed ticket in 12 months, he said. Where we find patterns, we reopen them with sunlight. Ryan nodded once. Already in motion, Daniel stepped in from the doorway, tablet in hand. 2 items, he said. Press scheduled for noon. Also, the union leadership wants a meeting today. They are wary of Equity Shield, but open to a joint statement about stopping bias on the line. Set it, Ethan said. I will go myself. We will not outsource the hard parts to memos. He turned back to the 3 at the table. One more thing, he said. You each will receive new titles, not as trophies, as tools. Authority shields those who carry it and those they serve. He wrote on a notepad and read as he wrote. Mariah Lopez, Director of Equity Intake and Care, Robert Miles. Director of Operational Accountability, Jamal Reed. Director of Truth and Training Media. Maria covered her mouth, then lowered her hand and sat straighter. Robert nodded, jaw tight with purpose. Jamal looked at his phone as if it had just become heavier and more precious. Your salaries will reflect the weight, Ethan added. So will your schedules. Do not work yourselves into silence. Rest is part of the work. A quiet laugh rippled around the table. Light, quick, welcome. Ethan looked at each of them in turn. You are not appointed to be perfect. You are appointed to be honest. You will tell me when we get it wrong, including if it is me. If you go quiet, we lose the point of this entirely. Maria found a small smile. We will not go quiet, she said. I will not. Robert placed a hand on the table. Nor I. Jamal pocketed his phone and lifted his chin. Nor me. A knock. Karen stepped in with a folder. Drafts, she said. Resolutions. Language on Equity Shield. The Justice Fund Charter. One more thing. She set a sealed envelope before Ethan. This was delivered to the front desk this morning. No return address. Addressed to you. Ethan turned the envelope in his hands. The paper was inexpensive, the ink slightly smudged from rain. He opened it. Inside, a single sheet, handwritten, careful. I was wrong. I hurt you. I hurt people I did not even see. I do not ask for my job back. I ask to learn. If you allow it, I will tell others what my arrogance taught me. I will use my shame like a lamp. I am sorry. No signature. But the C in Clara curved the way it had on every form she had filed. He could see it. Ethan folded the letter and set it face down. He did not comment. Not yet. Maria watched his hands and read nothing on his face. Robert glanced at the envelope and looked away. Jamal stared at the blank side of the paper as if it might light up. We begin at noon, Ethan said. Between now and then, drink water, call your people, and write down the first 3 actions you will take in your new roles. Small steps, real steps. They stood. Maria reached for the doorknob and paused. Sir, she said softly, when you stood in the rain last night, I thought you were alone. I do not think that any more. Ethan nodded once. Neither do I. When they were gone, he turned the letter again and read it one more time. He thought of how easy it would be to weaponize contrition and how careful he would need to be not to. Some doors must stay shut. Some doors must open with a guard at the hinge. Redemption is not a policy. It is a practice. He slipped the letter into the drawer with the photo of his parents. Then he stood, straightened his cuffs, and walked out to meet the day that would require all of them. By late morning, the city hummed with a kind of electricity that no weather could rival. Across the media, ticker lines blared Cole Aviation CEO to speak at noon. Cameras were already gathering at the downtown headquarters. Satellite vans jammed the curb. Reporters rehearsed their opening lines. Inside, Ethan Cole stood in front of a tall mirror, adjusting the cuffs of a fresh charcoal suit. The damp navy one was folded away, its fabric still marked faintly by the rain. He studied his reflection, not to check vanity, but to center himself. His father's words played in his mind. Stand in the storm. Prove who you are. Karen Whitfield entered, carrying the speech draft. It's ready. Simple. Direct. Ethan didn't take it. I'll speak without it. Karen hesitated. The board expects the board had its turn, Ethan said softly. Now it's the world's. Maria Lopez, Robert Miles, and Jamal Reed waited outside the press hall, each newly named to their roles, badges clipped to lanyards that still felt too heavy around their necks. Maria held a notepad, filled with scribbles she wasn't sure she'd use. Robert rubbed the edge of his wedding ring. Jamal steadied his phone. Though he wouldn't be filming, he just needed the comfort of it in his palm. Daniel Cross checked the stage setup. 3 chairs to the left, a single podium in the center. Ryan Hughes surveyed exits, eyes sharp, earpiece buzzing with updates from the security team. At 11:59, Ethan walked into the hall. The crowd rose in a rustle of clicks and whispers. Flashes fired like lightning. He stepped to the podium, laid both hands flat on it, and waited for silence to bloom. Yesterday, he began, voice even. I was told to stand outside in the rain. The room hushed to stillness. I was told, in my own company's lounge, that I did not belong, that my presence was an error, that my dignity was negotiable. Millions of you saw it. Millions of you felt the echo of it, because you have lived something like it in your own lives. At a store counter, in a classroom, on a street, you know the weight of being doubted before you are known. He paused, letting the words seep in. I did not come here to rehearse outrage. I came to promise change. For every passenger who buys a ticket, for every employee who carries a uniform, for every shareholder who believes a company should be better than its worst moment. He motioned to his left. With me are 3 colleagues who chose courage. Maria Lopez, Director of Equity Intake and Care; Robert Miles, Director of Operational Accountability; Jamal Reed, Director of Truth and Training Media. They are not here as ornaments. They are here because they will lead reforms that will define this company's soul. Maria stood, trembling slightly, but her voice found steadiness. Yesterday I was silent. Today I am not. Our hotline will open this week. It will listen when others try to close the door. Robert's turn. He kept it plain. My job used to be quiet. Now my job is interruption. If bias shows up on our floor, somebody will say no. Out loud. Jamal lifted his phone briefly. I recorded truth. Now my work is to make sure truth keeps being seen. No edits, no music, no hiding. Flashes popped faster. Reporters scribbled, murmurs spreading like a tide. Ethan stepped back in. These are first steps, but they are not the only ones. Cole Aviation will implement Equity Shield technology across all major hubs. We will open the Justice Fund with $10 million to compensate passengers harmed by bias. Every manager, including myself, will be paired with an accountability partner. And every closed complaint in the past 12 months will be audited and reopened if evidence demands it. A hand shot up. A reporter from CNN, Mr. Cole. Are you admitting systemic bias inside your company? Ethan looked directly at her. I am acknowledging reality. That is step 1 to repairing it. Denial builds nothing but rot. Another voice. How do you answer critics who say this is performative PR damage control? He leaned forward slightly. Performative would have been firing 3 people and moving on. This is systemic reform with names, budgets, and oversight. If that threatens anyone's comfort, good. Comfort built on silence is not worth keeping. The hall erupted in applause. Not all reporters, but employees scattered among them, and citizens who had walked in just to witness. The sound was raw, unscripted. Ethan let it swell, then raised a hand. I was asked yesterday to wait outside. Today, I say this: no one should wait outside dignity. Not for 5 minutes, not for 5 seconds. The words cut sharp and clear, and in the pause that followed, you could almost hear the nation inhale. When the conference ended, headlines flashed instantly across screens. Cole declares war on bias. Justice Fund announced. CEO turns humiliation into reform. Outside, crowds had gathered, holding signs that had been scribbled in haste. Stand with Ethan. Dignity has no rain delay. Maria exhaled hard as they stepped back into the corridor. I thought I would faint. You stood, Ethan said gently. That's enough. Jamal checked his phone, buzzing with hundreds of messages. My cousin just texted again. He said, one word. Rise. Robert chuckled. Low. Steady. Seems right. Karen caught up with Ethan. The board is nervous. Stock is dropping 0.5 point. But public sentiment. Let it drop, Ethan said. If we lose profit today to earn trust tomorrow, we win. He turned to Daniel and Ryan. Prepare for pushback. The unions will resist the AI. Some investors will complain. Let them. Change without friction is a fairy tale. Ryan nodded. We'll be ready. Ethan paused at the office door. For a moment he thought of the letter Clara Monroe had written, folded in his drawer. Shame like a lamp, she had said. He didn't know yet what he would do with her request, but he knew what he would do with the moment. Now keep walking, keep standing, because storms didn't wait for permission, and neither did dignity. The press conference was barely over when the ripple became a wave. By mid-afternoon, networks ran wall-to-wall coverage of Ethan Cole's address. Clips of his phrase, no one should wait outside. Dignity echoed across radio, television, and the endless churn of social media. Hashtags bloomed like wildfire. Stand with Ethan. Justice Fund. Dignity First. In the headquarters lobby, employees who had never spoken to each other before shared nods, small smiles, even hugs. Something had shifted. They could feel it in the way strangers lingered longer at the elevators, the way conversation carried more honesty, less caution. But storms do not move in only one direction. As Ethan and his team regrouped upstairs, pushback was already brewing. Karen Whitfield entered his office with her tablet. We've got a problem. 3 major investors are demanding an emergency call. They're citing cost exposure from the Justice Fund and what they call overreach with Equity Shield. Daniel Cross frowned. Which investors? Karen listed them: a hedge fund out of Connecticut, a private equity firm in Texas, and an old money family trust with deep airline ties. They've threatened to reconsider their stakes if we don't course correct. Their words, not mine. Ethan leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing. So we are asked to choose between dollars and dignity. Again, Ryan Hughes crossed his arms. And unions are calling. They're uneasy. Word is they'll resist Equity Shield unless oversight includes their reps. They don't trust the company to hold the data fairly. Ethan tapped the desk once, a thoughtful rhythm. Invite them in. Give them seats at the table. Oversight loses meaning if it's owned by the powerful alone. Karen hesitated. That may inflame the board. They'll say you're giving away too much authority. Authority that wasn't theirs to begin with. Ethan replied. His tone was firm, but calm. Bias is not a private matter. It's a shared burden. Maria Lopez appeared in the doorway, a notepad clutched to her chest. Sir, we've already had 80 hotline calls in 2 hours. Not just employees, passengers, contractors, even vendors. Some of the stories. Her voice trailed off. Say them, Ethan urged. Maria swallowed. One caller said he was escorted off a flight last year for looking suspicious because he fell asleep with his hoodie up. Another said her mother, who didn't speak English well, was left without assistance during an emergency landing. They thought she wasn't worth explaining to. The room fell heavy. Robert Miles joined them, holding a thin folder. And here, he said quietly, complaints reopened already show patterns. Same supervisors, same lounges, same gates. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Truth is flooding in. Let it. Outside the building, crowds continued to swell. Some carried signs of support. Others carried placards that read, "Keep costs down or no to Big Brother AI." News vans jockeyed for angles. The storm was no longer confined to boardrooms and break rooms. It was spilling into streets and airwaves. By evening, Ethan sat with his team in a smaller conference room. No cameras, just voices, raw and tired. Robert spoke first. I'm worried. Ethan, change this fast. People dig in their heels. They'll say you're tearing down what they know. Ethan nodded. I expect resistance. I welcome it. Resistance shows where the cracks already are. Jamal Reed leaned forward, phone glowing in his hand. My video is trending again. But not just the clip. People are cutting it with their own stories. Hashtag I was outside. Thousands of them. A teacher turned away from a bank. A mother told she didn't belong in a hospital waiting room. A veteran mistaken for staff in his own apartment building. It's bigger than us now. Maria's eyes filled. It's heartbreaking and powerful. Karen glanced at Ethan. If it grows, politicians will get involved. EFA, DOT, maybe even Congress. You'll be asked to testify. Then I will, Ethan said. We asked for sunlight. We cannot flinch when it shines. The team sat in quiet for a moment. The storm outside pressed against the windows. Ethan finally stood, walking to the glass. Below, the city pulsed with headlights and sirens. Movement without pause. He spoke without turning. This company is no longer just an airline. It is a stage where justice, or the lack of it, plays in full view. We can either stumble under that light or stand taller because of it. Daniel crossed his arms. You know some of those investors will pull out. Stock may dip more than a point. Then let it, Ethan said softly. I would rather lose their money than lose my soul. Silence again, but it was the silence of agreement, not fear. As the meeting ended, Maria lingered. Sir, she said quietly, I've been thinking, you told us not to go quiet. But what if I fail? What if the system eats me like it always eats? The small voices Ethan turned, his gaze steady. Maria, the system only eats silence, not voices, not anymore. You will not be alone, not while I breathe. She nodded, her fear not erased but softened by the weight of his promise. That night, Ethan returned to his apartment. He loosened his tie, sat at the kitchen table, and pulled out the folded letter from Clara Monroe. He read it again under the dim light. I will use my shame like a lamp. He let the words linger, wrestling inside him. Could people truly change? Should redemption be granted or earned? His mother's voice rose in memory. Do not let the world decide your worth, but do not close the door on someone trying to learn theirs. Ethan closed his eyes, exhaling into the quiet. The storm outside rattled the windows, but inside, he felt something steadier than rain resolve, deep and unshaken. Tomorrow would bring harder battles, but tonight he allowed himself a small measure of rest. Morning unfolded like a careful apology. The storm that had battered the city all night slipped to the horizon, leaving the streets rinsed and bright. At Cole Aviation Headquarters, sunlight broke through the east-facing glass and laid warm rectangles across the lobby floor. Employees stepped into those squares of light as if into a promise, eyes a little softer, greetings a little longer. In the executive suite, Ethan Cole stood by his window nursing a plain mug of coffee. He didn't add sugar, He wanted the taste honest. A map of the reforms lay on his desk, arrows, dates, names. Equity Shield's pilot program had cleared legal review with union cosigners. The Justice Fund had processed its first 5 cases. Maria's hotline, staffed in shifts, was answering in under 2 minutes. Robert's accountability partners had begun their first rounds, every pair documenting how they would interrupt bias before it had room to breathe. Jamal's training module, black screen, raw audio. No polish was already required viewing for new hire orientation. He set the mug down and opened a small drawer. The letter from Clara Monroe rested beside the same photo of his parents, his mother laughing, his father mid-smile, kitchen tile bright behind them. He read the words again. I will use my shame like a lamp. He had slept on the question twice. Now he made a decision. He picked up the phone and dialed Ryan Hughes. Ryan, he said, bring Clara in. No cameras, no theater. I want to hear her. Then I'll decide how she participates. She is not returning to duty, but her story might stop 1,000 moments like ours. Understood, Ryan said. I'll arrange a private meeting. No promises to her. Just a chance to speak. Ethan ended the call and exhaled. He did not confuse a second chance with a second innocence. He would be careful with the hinge of that door. His calendar reminded him of the evening his father's 70th birthday. Backyard, string lights, family gathered. The thought tightened his chest with an ache both sharp and sweet. It would be the first gathering since the storm. He had words to offer his father, words he had carried since boyhood and only now could set down. By late afternoon, the office quieted. The urgent calls slowed to steady check-ins. Karen dropped by with a short update. Investors are still anxious, she said, but 2 have softened. One of them watched the training module and said he heard himself in the wrong places. Not an apology, but not nothing. Ethan agreed. Daniel stepped in behind her. Union meeting tomorrow morning. We are aligned on oversight and data retention. They want co-ownership of the metrics. Seems right. Good, Ethan said. We are done grading our own homework. They smiled, small victories, rightly sized. Evening spread across the city with the easy grace of a curtain lowered by a careful hand. Ethan drove through the neighborhood where his father lived. Houses sat close and friendly. Porches wore flower boxes and wind chimes. When he turned onto his father's street, he saw the glow before he saw the home string lights strung from maple to fence. A grill's thin plume of smoke. Neighbors laughing with cousins at the gate. He parked and stepped out. Children ran past with paper airplanes, shrieking when one soared, groaning when another nose-dived into the grass. Somewhere, someone tuned a guitar and missed 2 notes, then found the third, inside the backyard. His father stood near a folding table loaded with iced tea and bowls of salad. William Cole wore a crisp white shirt and a cap that said Tigers in faded letters. He looked smaller than Ethan remembered and taller than memory allowed, both at once. When he saw his son, he opened his arms with a grin that belonged to every age he had ever been. Son, he said. He didn't add any other word. None were needed. Ethan folded into his father's hug. The world quieted for a second, then rushed back with the low music of conversation and silverware. Family joined. Cousins clapped him on the back. An aunt pinched his cheek like the years hadn't stacked up. Jamal arrived through the side gate with his cousin and lifted a hand. Maria came too, invited by Ethan's sister, eyes widening at the spread as if she had walked into a memory she hadn't owned until now. Robert and his wife slipped in with a plate of cornbread and the disbelieving smile of people who had worked their whole lives and only just started being seen. Daniel and Karen stood near the fence, happy to be steady shadows. Ryan leaned against a post, watching the perimeter without making it look like watching. The sun went down in slow bands of amber. The guitars found their notes. The grill clicked off. Children collapsed into lawn chairs with the proud exhaustion of athletes. When the hum softened and plates were mostly empty, neighbors settled in a semicircle around the string lights. Someone tapped a spoon against a glass. Heads turned. Eyes found Ethan, almost on their own. It was time. He stood and looked first at his father, then at the faces of the people he loved and the people he led. He didn't hold paper. He didn't need it. When I was 12, he began. I walked into a corner store to buy milk. I walked out with empty hands. He paused, the air listening. A clerk had called me boy and told me not to steal. I hadn't stolen anything. I hadn't opened my mouth. I walked home with shame, heavier than the gallon I didn't carry. My mother met me at the door and touched my face. My father put on his coat and walked back with me. He did not shout. He did not whisper. He told the owner that I was his son, that we would not be accused for existing. The dignity was not merchandise for sale. He bought the milk, paid exact, and placed the gallon in my hands. He said, "Do not let the world decide your worth. Not then, not later." He turned his palms upward now, as if offering the old gallon again. Yesterday, the world tried to decide. It asked me to wait outside. It measured me and found me wanting because of what it could see and refused to learn what it could not. A breeze tugged the lights, made them sway like a quiet choir. "I stood in the rain," Ethan said, "and I remembered the milk. I remembered the walk home, and I remembered my mother's sentence, which grew into a map I've followed all my life. Last night, with all of your prayers tucked somewhere inside me, I decided not to prove my worth with titles or numbers or cars in a lane. I decided to let dignity stand on its own feet. And then I decided to make sure no one under our roof has to stand alone again." He let the quiet hold that commitment. He glanced at Maria, who was crying softly but not looking away. He nodded at Robert, whose jaw was set not with anger but with resolve. He met Jamal's eyes and saw an ember. "We have work to do," he said. "We will make mistakes. We will apologize for them in full sentences, not in pieces. We will correct as we go, but we will not return to quiet." Silence raised us to think it was polite. It was not. It was expensive. It cost us parts of ourselves. We are done paying that price. He lifted his glass of iced tea. "To my father," he said, voice warming. "Who taught me to walk back to the counter and to do it without hate? To my mother, whose words still fit in my pocket. To my family, who let me leave the table to build a company and welcomed me back when the storm soaked my suit." Laughter darted gently across the circle. "And to everyone here," he added, sweeping his gaze across neighbors and colleagues, "who are choosing a harder way because it is the right one." He raised the glass higher. "We will not make the rain our story. We will make the after." Glasses lifted. The small backyard filled with the soft sound of people drinking to a promise. Music came back timidly, then settled into a familiar rhythm. A neighbor told a joke only half the circle understood, and all of it laughed anyway. Children returned to their planes. Maria's phone buzzed another hotline call, but she silenced it with a note to return it after dessert. Work would still be there. Tonight had a different task. Later, when the sky was a soft navy and the air held the cricket's simple courage. Ethan wandered to the fence line, the grass pressed cool through his shoes. He found his father there, hands in his pockets, shoulders at ease. "You did good," William said, looking out at the dusk. "You did real good." Ethan breathed in the warm night. "I almost shouted," he admitted. "Shouting's easy," his father said. "Standing is harder. You did the hard thing." He nudged him with a shoulder. "Your mother would have said you finally listened." "I always listened," Ethan said, smiling. "I just didn't always know what to do with what I heard." William nodded. "That's the whole job. Hearing right and doing right. You'll have 1,000 days like this, little storms and big ones. Remember the milk. Remember the walk back." They stood in companionable silence, the kind that doesn't end conversations but nurses them. From the patio, Maria approached with 2 cups of coffee she had insisted on brewing. "I hope it's strong enough," she said, offering them. "It is," Ethan said, taking a sip. "Thank you." She looked at the dark yard, then back at him. "The hotline is full of sorrow, but also gratitude. People are saying thank you for building a door. They are scared to use it, but they are glad to see it. Doors do that," William said. "Scare you and save you." Maria smiled. "I will borrow that for the welcome script." "Borrow it forever," William said. "It will still be mine." They laughed. The ease of it held. Jamal wandered over next, phone in his pocket for once. "I didn't film a minute of this," he said. "Feels wrong to point a lens at joy like this. Some things should just live here. Some should," Ethan agreed, "and some should be taught. Your module is already changing rooms." Jamal nodded, then dropped his voice. "I heard from Clara," he said carefully. "She thanked me for not adding music. Said the quiet made her hear herself." Ethan took that in. "She will meet with me," he said. "She will not return to her old role, but she may stand in front of rooms and hold up her own mirror. If she uses shame like a lamp, as she promised, then her light will be useful." Jamal looked relieved. "Useful is a good word. Useful is holy," William said. "Don't tell the preacher I said that. Or do?" They laughed again, this time louder. The string lights swayed. As the night thinned, people hugged goodbye in ones and twos. Dishes clinked into tubs. The guitars fell quiet. Ethan's sisters gathered wrappers into bags and threatened anyone who tried to help with another plate of cake. The backyard began to look like itself again, only tidier and somehow more alive. Ethan stayed until the last guest left. He walked his father to the back step, then stepped aside as neighbors insisted on washing the platters anyway. When the house quieted and the lights clicked off one by one, he stood alone under the sky and let gratitude fall through him like a soft rain. He pulled his phone at last. A message from Daniel Union Deal in Principle. Another from Karen 2 investors reversing their threat. One from Maria Hotline's first thank you note. One from Robert first report from accountability partners. An attendant stopped a supervisor in the break room from mocking an accent. Logged, apologized, repaired. He typed a single reply to all 4 threads. Keep going. Before he put the phone away, he opened the photo of his parents and held the screen in his palm like a compass. He whispered the sentence back to the picture, to the kitchen, to the night. Do not let the world decide your worth. The sentence did not belong only to him anymore. It belonged to the crews, the passengers, the strangers writing their own gates into being. It belonged to anyone who had ever been asked to wait outside dignity and decided to stand in the rain until the doors remembered their purpose. Ethan clicked the screen dark, pocketed the phone, and turned toward the quiet street. As he closed the gate, a thin breeze moved through the maple leaves overhead, sounding for a moment like applause from a crowd too far away to see. He did not wave back. He simply walked forward, steady, into a city washed clean enough to try again. Life has a way of revealing who we truly are in moments of conflict. The story of the elderly woman reminds us that dignity is not something given by others. It is something we carry, and sometimes must defend, even when the cost feels heavy. Too often, society dismisses the elderly, forgetting that they are the keepers of memory, of sacrifice, of endurance. The lesson here is both simple and profound. Respect is not optional, whether in a store, on a plane, or in our own homes. The way we treat one another speaks louder than any title or position. Power built on arrogance collapses quickly. Power built on truth can endure. For older audiences, perhaps the message is even sharper. You are not invisible. Your voice, your story, your demand for fairness matters. And for younger listeners, it is a reminder one day. You too will carry years on your shoulders. The question is, will the world treat you with the respect you deserve? The answer depends on how we choose to act today. Thank you, all your friends, for staying with us through this journey. Stories like this matter because they remind us of who we are and who we can choose to be. If you felt moved, if you found a piece of yourself in this story, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Together, we can keep these voices alive and ensure that dignity always has the final word.